Hey guys, and welcome to my channel. Today's video we're talking about the best horror of 2022. So 2022 was an amazing year for horror, so much so that I had a really hard time narrowing down my list to like 10. I'm gonna start off with some notable mentions before getting into my top 11 because I really had a hard time. I could not keep it to 10. There were so many good movies this year. That argument that there's not enough good horror anymore could not exist this year. So the first film in my notable mentions is a Spanish horror film called Peggy. Peggy centers around an overweight bullied teenager who develops a unique relationship with a strange man who is kind of obsessed with her. He shows his affection by kidnapping her tormentors. So I liked this one. I was expecting a little bit more violence and gore. I thought the lead character was really interesting to follow. I felt like I was going to be watching a revenge horror movie from the POV of the bullied teenager, but it goes in a different direction, which I thought was also unique. Next is What Josiah Saw, which is currently streaming on Shudder. This movie really blew me away because I was not expecting to like it as much as I did, and it also has stayed with me. I have not been able to get it out of my head. This basically is a story of three siblings who reunite on their family farm years later because they want to put it up for sale. And when they reunite, it reawakens old demons within their family. This story is split up into three parts and it follows each sibling at their various stages in life, and they're all going through a lot. And slowly over the film, you learn what happened to them in their childhood, and it's dark. This one has some really taboo stuff. It goes to really dark, bleak places. It's a slow burn, but it leads to an incredibly violent, dark, and depressing climax that just felt like a punch in the gut at the end. Another notable mention is Nope. This one surprisingly didn't make my top 11 list because, I don't know, I think I looked at it more as sci-fi than horror, but it's very much has some really horrific moments that stuck with me and have been burned into my brain. So this centers on a family who run a horse ranch and they begin to see a UFO hovering above their ranch, and they decide they want to capture it on film to become famous or get rich off of it. Plans do not go accordingly. This one has one of the best ensemble casts I've ever seen on film. It has one of the most horrific abduction scenes I've seen since Fire in the Sky. I cannot get that scene out of my head. It's absolutely terrifying. And you don't really see a ton of stuff. You see just enough that it lets your mind run wild. And I just think it's a perfect summer blockbuster. It's a perfect summer horror sci-fi movie. Next is X from Ti West. This is another one I thought would be in my top list. This is a movie about a group of filmmakers who are making a porno on this elderly couple's farm, and it goes horribly wrong for them when the elderly couple figure out what they're doing. This one is another one that has an amazing cast, which is what makes this movie stand out. It feels like a love letter to 70s horror movies, and it's very sex positive, which was nice to see, and it's sex positive for the females. Like, the females are very empowered and independent, and they're not in this career because they couldn't do anything else. Like, this is what they want to do. Like, they take charge of themselves, and that was really cool to see. Next notable mention is Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. This one was a fun slasher whodunit about a group of rich friends who gather for a hurricane party, and they play a game called Bodies, 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 and the night takes a horrible turn when people start dying. I thought this one had some really interesting commentary. It was really funny. It has a great cast and a surprising twist. You Are Not My Mother is another one that is a notable mention for me. It's a very dark folk horror about a young girl whose mother goes missing and then she returns and she's not the same. This one I think is interesting because it takes a look at mental illness and the relationships between family members and how toxic it can become, and it just had some really haunting imagery. It's a very sad, emotional movie. Hatching is another one in my notable mentions. This is a Finnish horror movie about a young girl who finds an egg in the forest and she brings it home and it hatches this creature. This one gets really bizarre and weird. It has some really cool special effects. The creature is, I think, puppetry. It just was really unique and just crazy. I wasn't expecting it to go where it went. Alright, so now it's time to get into my top 11 horror movies of 2022. This was so damn hard. First, we're kicking it off with The Cursed. Cursed is set in the 19th century, and it centers around this small village that is plagued by a series of unexplainable animal attacks. These animals might be a little bit like werewolves and basically sends this little village into chaos. This one has some of the coolest special effects I've ever seen and some really brutal scenes where I was shocked at how dark and bloody and gory some of these moments are. And there's specific moments in this movie that reminded me of The Thing, where a character is going through a transformation, and it was just one of the coolest things I've ever seen. I think a lot of people slept on this one. I think it's a really cool werewolf movie. Next up is Speak No Evil. Now this isn't one I would necessarily rewatch, but it's one that I have not been able to stop thinking about since I watched it. I think it's one of the most frustrating and disturbing watches. I feel like everybody reacts to it differently. So this centers on two couples who meet on holiday. One of the couples invites the other to stay with them for a weekend, and they reluctantly agree. And when they get there, they realize this family, this couple, is nothing like they expected, and they're really in an uncomfortable situation, but they don't ever say anything. They allow themselves to stay in this situation until it gets increasingly worse. So this one has a lot of interesting things to say about how people often put themselves into uncomfortable situations, and they will stay in those uncomfortable situations because they don't want to upset anybody. They want to stay polite and not hurt anybody's feelings. In this case, we see how badly that situation can go. I think that the performances in this are incredible, and there's just so much tension and dread, and you just want to scream at the people on the screen and tell them to get out of the situation. I think it's a very divisive film. You either like it or you don't, and I personally liked it. I was very upset. Obviously, it's very disturbing, and I don't think you should go into this one lightly. But I will never ever go home with anybody I meet anywhere, especially on vacation. I would never spend a weekend in somebody else's home. I don't even like to spend time in people's homes that I know. Number 9 is Sissy. So this is a film about an influencer who is kind of like a mental health advocate, and she runs into an old childhood friend who used to be her best friend, and the childhood friend invites her to a weekend getaway for her birthday. And when she gets there, she encounters this other girl from their childhood who was basically her bully. And slowly over the course of the film, you learn about Sissy, our lead character's dark past, and what happened in their childhood and why the friendship between these girls broke apart. I love the commentary on how fake social media is. This one is darkly funny, surprisingly dark and violent, and I had a lot of fun with it. Coming in at number 8 is The Innocents. So The Innocents is a Finnish horror film about a group of children who meet in the apartment complex they live in, and they discover that they all have unique superpowers. One of the children, they use their powers for bad, like really bad stuff. This one is just, it was so dark and disturbing because number 1, you're watching children do very adult things, and it gets violent. It gets surprisingly violent and dark, and it's just hard watching little kids who are supposed to be innocent and happy and carefree doing these really horrific things to each other. I will warn you though, there is a really horrific scene involving a cat that almost made me shut the movie off, but I'm glad I pushed through because it was a really, really good film about childhood, and just, it's so dark. Coming in at number 7 is Resurrection. This movie, you might not think it's horror, but it gets pretty horrifying. So this centers on a young career woman who is just living her best life. She's played by Rebecca Hall, who is amazing in this, in everything she's in. And she seems to have it all until one day a stranger from her past comes back into her life and everything unravels. So there's a 9-minute monologue in this movie from Rebecca Hall where she describes the events that happened in her past with this strange person. I could not breathe for those 9 minutes. It's truly just breathtaking to watch her deliver those lines. You just felt every moment, and I could not move listening to what happened. It's just absolutely terrifying. This person, you realize from her past, was insane, and they did some truly horrific things, and they're still trying to manipulate her. And it's just so scary to watch him still have that power over her, even though she's been far removed from him for years, but it's still like those old habits come back very quickly, and it's just scary watching this character unravel unstable mentally. I also like that there's different layers of this film where you're wondering, is what is happening on screen real, or is Rebecca Hall's character imagining it? Is it all in her head? So she's really kind of an unreliable narrator, and there's just some really dark stuff with what she thinks happened in the past that I can't really give away because it's a spoiler. When you hear what the person from her past did, you're like, holy crap, is that real? It's a mind bender. It plays with your mind, and I like that it's very ambiguous, especially in the end. You don't get clear answers, and those things are more terrifying to me than anything else. Coming in at number 6 is a found footage horror movie called Deadware. So this one is 60 minutes long. It's super short, and it centers entirely on a desktop computer like Host. So it's about two old friends who decide to have a video chat. I think it's set in the 90s, and they get an invitation from another friend to play this weird, creepy horror game. So they start playing it, and it's a point and click game. So you're basically watching them play this game, and things get increasingly worse over the course of the film. I love this one because it's so simple, but it's filled with so much nostalgia. I love the point and click element to it. It felt very much like watching streamers on YouTube, and it just brought me back to the days of when I was little and I would watch my brothers play on the computer or my dad play games on the computer. And I love that you're seeing things as the characters are seeing them. Everything's unfolding along with them, so you're in the dark too. I really enjoyed it. I don't think it's perfect, but it's a movie that immediately became a favorite. It's one that I tell people to watch if they love found footage, and especially if they love that 90s nostalgia, early 2000s nostalgia feeling. And it's quick. It's such a quick movie, and I think everybody needs to check it out. Coming in at number 5 is Incantation. This movie scared the crap out of me. It's very interactive, and it plays with your mind a bit. So this centers on a young woman who is documenting her experience bringing her daughter home from foster care. And you learn over the course of the film that years prior, when she was pregnant with her daughter, she did something that kind of cursed her. And that curse is still following her now in life. So she's basically trying to put a stop to the curse. And we see some really messed up stuff that happened in the past involving shrines, and there's incantations that have to happen to fix things. And she starts saying the incantation on the screen, and I felt so uncomfortable because I was like,
holy shit, is this a real incantation?
I don't know, my mind was like just going crazy at that point. And she's saying all this stuff, and I'm like, no, stop. I don't want you to say the full thing. And she's like, just say it with me. You don't even have to say it. You can just feel it in your head. And I was like,
bitch,
please, I don't want to say it. Don't pull me into this. She's a sneaky motherfucker. I will tell you that. It's not all as it seems. I love how it's interactive like that, and it makes you kind of feel like you're in on things, and I was on the edge of my seat at some points, and it's just really creepy. I loved it. I thought it was very well done. It's another found footage horror movie that I think it really used the found footage element to its advantage very well. Coming in at number 4 is the psychological horror thriller Watcher, starring Maika Monroe. This one is really dark, and it plays on every woman's fear of being stalked and basically murdered, you know? So this centers on Maika Monroe's character. She moves to a new country with her husband, and she doesn't speak the language there, and she's feeling very much like a fish out of water. She is feeling very isolated, and she begins to think she's being watched by the neighbor across the way. But the thing is, no one believes her, including her husband. So there's a lot of gaslighting going on in this movie. There's a lot of paranoia, and it's just really uncomfortable to watch. You just think, wow, this happens a lot. Like, women are put into these situations where they are stalked, and there's nothing that really can be done about it. And people often question, you know, well, are you just imagining it? Blah, blah, blah. And women often aren't believed in situations like this until they're murdered. It was such a well done psychological horror filled with so much tension and dread, and Maika Monroe is incredible. And it has an amazing, terrifying final act. Coming in at number 3 is another found footage horror, and that is Deadstream. So Deadstream centers on a disgraced internet personality who is basically trying to win back his fans by hosting a live stream at a haunted house. So you're also getting to see this character talk to his audience, and you're getting to see the audience comments. You would think that would get annoying, but I feel like they did it very well, where the comments come up on the screen at the perfect time. They're not too much. There's a lot of interaction between the commenters that really elevate the story. And also the lead character character, you think he's gonna be really obnoxious and annoying, which he is, but the actor who's playing him, he's got this kind of charm to him, and you can't help but watch him and laugh along with him. He's just a lovable goof who is kind of a shitty person, but it's fun watching him go through these horrific, over-the-top, gross things. It was just so funny, and I thought it was a fun take on the found footage haunted house trope, and I just love what they did with it. Coming in at number 2 is a movie I never thought would be in my top list when I first initially heard about it, and that is Smile. This movie is surprisingly very dark and disturbing, and it's scary. It scared me. So this centers on a doctor who experiences a traumatic event with one of her patients who kills herself in front of her, and she tells her about this thing that's following her. And basically after this, the doctor starts experiencing the same things, and she thinks that she's cursed. And this curse, it basically takes shape of other people, and it's just really sinister, and it makes you see things that are not really there. What I love about this movie is the tension and dread is like off the charts, and I love that it really plays with your mind. So you don't know what's happening, what's real, what's not, and it's kind of got a dreamlike quality to it where our main character, she doesn't even realize what's happening until it's happening, and it's absolutely horrifying. And there's just some really dark, disturbing scenes in this involving death and blood and all that stuff. So it surprised me. And then when it gets to the end, I was blown away because it just gets ginormous. Like where they go with it in the end, I was not expecting to see it. And I was just like, what is happening? Like it's just so bonkers, and it just feels huge in scope, and I just loved it. I loved every minute of it. It's a little long, but I wasn't like checking my watch, you know, like I really enjoyed it and could have watched it longer. I love the curse element of it, how it's kind of like The Ring, and it's just really interesting, and I think that there's lots of room for a sequel where they can expand on this curse and this story and follow different characters who were going through it. So yeah, love this one. I think it was a lot of fun. Coming in at number 1 is another movie that I could never have imagined was going to be what it was, and that is Barbarian. So Barbarian is about a young woman who she rents out an Airbnb, and when she gets there, she discovers that somebody is already in the house because it's been double booked, and she has nowhere else to go, so she decides to stay the night with this guy, and things go horribly wrong. They go in crazy directions, and I'm not going to say anything else about it because I can't say anything without spoiling anything, and this is one of those movies you need to go in blindly because there were so many moments and twists in this movie that I was like,
what the fuck is going on?
But it was so fun, but also really dark and disturbing. It went places I was not expecting, and it was shocking, and I love how it really examines the relationships between men and women, toxic masculinity. Justin Long is in this movie, and he is perfect. He plays this character perfectly, and the lead actress is also great, and the special effects, backstory of everything that's going on. I feel like there's so many layers to this movie, and there's a lot of interesting themes that this film examines, and I was blown away. There you have it. Those are all of the horror movies I loved in 2022. Honestly, there weren't a lot of movies that I didn't like, and there's still so many movies that I haven't seen yet. I'm so excited for the next year because I think we're just gonna keep getting more exciting horror from new voices. Let me know what was your favorite movie of 2022. What's your top 5? I have to know. Let me know of any lesser known 2022 horror movies that need a little bit more love because I think there's a lot. I hope you are having a happy holidays, happy new year. Thank you so much for watching me and joining me on this weird ass horror journey, and I hope you come back in 2023. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I will catch you next time. Bye.